So welcome to session 2 of the day on SME cybersecurity. So for those of you that were around a minute or two ago with the first session on incident response, so we're going to look at cybersecurity for SMEs in this session. And what we're focusing on really is, on one level, cybersecurity for an SME is really simple. You just go, you need all the same, because you've got systems, they're visible to the internet, you're doing stuff like a big organization does, and therefore you need all the things everybody else needs to protect yourself. And there's an element of truth there, but that's also unrealistic because you don't have the in-house expertise. You're probably using external providers who don't have the expertise, and you don't have the resources. So it's not good enough to say do the same as everybody else. What you have to think about is, what can you reasonably do within limited resources and with limited expertise? That's what we're going to start looking at over the next bit less than an hour. As with all our webinars, post questions at any time, post them to the panelists. Claire on my left will decide if they are a good question, worth asking, and she will show me, or she'll shuffle in a chair like she did in the last session and make me think there's a question coming my way, and there wasn't. She's pulling a face now. You will receive slides, so you don't need to make notes or anything. And now's a great time to book for some workshops in May. If you like what we're saying here and you think, I need to know more, because I save a bit for the workshops, we've got some half-day virtual workshops to take you through things in more depth and tailor them directly to your challenges, because you're just a camera today, and I don't know what your individual challenges are when it comes to your SME security. So we have events where we can get into that depth and relate it to you. Just a little bit about that at the end. And there's a podcast coming, which the first podcast, if you're an SME, it's not for you, but there will be future ones that will be. But anyway, there's a podcast coming your way. This is second session of today. And we're compacting these a little bit. We normally start them an hour and a half in between each one, do a full hour, and have a little bit of time maybe to answer some questions that might get posted in between the sessions. My fault completely today. We've restructured it because I'm heading off to the airport to go on holiday, and there's some disruption at the airport, so I don't want to take too many risks. So I said, got to be finished for 1 o'clock. Didn't want to start before 9, so we got back to back 1 hour, so a little bit time compressed today. My fault, sorry. That's why I'm dressed holiday gear from the waist down and shirt from the waist up. I'll leave it to your imagination what I look like from the waist down. But for somebody here called Len, who has been spreading a rumor that there's Hawaiian shorts involved, there isn't. So just let you know that. After this 10 o'clock session, we're doing one on breach detection. Applicable to all organizations, but I've got something to say in this session about what you should do as an SME, so you don't do too much in that area. And then 12 o'clock, we look at securing websites and some of the pretty major technology failings that we're finding about how people are securing websites and resulting in websites getting breached. Little bit about us. We are the longest standing full service cybersecurity specialists in the UK, and those are some of our credentials. These are some of the people that we provide services to, and a little bit about what we do. We do assurance work, so pretty much 50-50 assurance work, helping people assess and test and review their security and build security to meet certain standards. Dependent on the standard, we sometimes assess to that standard, but if there's a clear separation between the people who help you get to the point of assessment and the people who just do the assessment, we go on the side of helping you get there rather than doing the assessment. But some standards work where it's the same person. The person who helps you also then confirms that you've done all the right things. So that's our assurance division. And then our MDR, or managed detection and response, is stopping breaches, detecting them 24/7, security operations centres in the UK and Australia, and responding when people have an incident. So that's what we do as an organisation. And that's our security operations centre across the road, where we are here in the UK, and we have another one in Australia. We currently don't have any clients based in Australia, Australia is chosen to give us a high quality location for doing the 24/7 monitoring. Because working nights, monitoring cybersecurity, you have to do it 24/7 because the hackers work 24/7. If you introduce night shifts, you're going to get poorer quality work and you're not going to retain the good people because they won't want to work nights. So you've really got to geographically disperse yourself, hence UK and Australia. So let's dive into SMEs. So top 3 mistakes SMEs make. The first one is they believe that hackers will target larger organizations. So there's some logic here. So where does this come from? There is large organizations have more to steal and the impacts of, say, ransomware could be more damaging, therefore better to rob somebody that's got more to rob. But think about, from a criminal's point of view, criminals, do they only rob from rich people? Do they? So if you're thinking, I think I might have a career as a robber, then why don't you target Buckingham Palace? Because there's lots of good stuff in there that could be worth stealing. But you wouldn't go for the biggest and the most expensive place to rob. You go for where you think it's going to be easy and you're not going to get caught. So when you actually think it through, why would the hackers choose larger organizations where they're more likely to get caught and it's more difficult? Would they go after smaller organizations where it might be easier and they might get a quicker return? Although that return might not be. So they might not make millions, but they might make very steady tens of thousands of pounds by targeting smaller organizations. So the reason you think it's larger might be misplaced, thinking there's more to be gained, but actually it's more difficult. It might also be led by, you hear stories about large organizations getting hacked. Now, you don't hear about stories about large organizations getting hacked because it's only happening to large organizations. You hear it because it's more interesting for the press. The reality is the hackers aren't targeting anybody. They're not sitting down and analyzing and go, let's go after a small company X this week. I dealt with a breach recently from a plumbers. Now, they're reasonable sized plumbers and they employ a few hundred people, but there's no hacking group sat there going, right, what are we going to do today? Who are we going to attack today? What about plumbers? They don't do that. People make mistakes. The hackers spot them, they exploit them, and they see what return they can get. So they're not sitting generally thinking, who do we attack today? I'm not saying there aren't some hacking groups and nation state attackers who aren't thinking, who do we want to attack, and trying to target those people. That does happen, but for the vast majority of organizations, you make a mistake, the hackers spot it, they will then target you because you've made a mistake. So don't believe it's going to happen to large organizations. It happens to everybody. They assume that their IT provider or cloud service provider is providing cybersecurity. It's a reasonable assumption. It's a dangerous assumption. You might think, what place has this organization in providing SMEs with IT services or cybersecurity services or cloud services if they're not very good at cybersecurity? In an ideal world, they would be open and honest about their limitations and would only provide services they could do competently. But we don't live in an ideal world. And you as an SME probably are basing decisions on who to buy things from based on price. Cheap IT, cheap cloud services doesn't include cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is difficult and can be pricey. And therefore, if you're out shopping for things cheap, you are not going to get quality and you're not going to get cybersecurity. So you might think it's amazing that somebody would host my website with no security at all, but they're doing that at a price, and that's the price you wanted to pay. So, for example, I remember sitting with one SME when they'd been breached. The breach involved their firewall being completely misconfigured. And the owner asked me, well, what could I and should I have expected from my IT provider in terms of managing this firewall? And at the time, we did manage firewalls. We don't really do that anymore. But at the time, a managed firewall from us would be a minimum of £1,000 a month. And I said to him, what are you paying for this managed firewall service? And he pulled out the paperwork, and he was paying £15 a year. So £15 a year does not, that's for the whole thing, the service, including the hardware, the software, and the expertise. So what can you expect from £15 a year from a managed firewall, where the people who do it properly, it's £1,000 a month, and you have to buy the hardware at the start of it and pay for some setup configuration. So you could see that you get what you pay for to a certain extent. Next mistake is not calling incident response specialists quickly enough. Given that most breaches or breaches tend to peak weekends, bank holidays, etc., you would expect, if somebody hasn't got a retainer where they would call us immediately, which is a big benefit of a retainer. Should have said that in the last session, really. Anyway, you would expect that we would see more calls on a Monday morning of people coming back after a weekend, finding things not right and thinking better get specialists in. Actually, our peak time for people who have no relationship with us already is Friday lunchtime, Friday afternoon. So they struggle, fail to correct the breach, make it worse, and then at the end of the week, they think better get some specialists in. So getting your incident response specialist in, the sooner the better. The quicker you get the specialists in, whether it's us or somebody else, the quicker you get them in, the quicker the breach will be resolved, the less you'll pay them and the less overall costliness of the whole breach. I used this slide in the last session. I tend to use it in every session, particularly for SMEs. Every breach is preventable, so think prevention first, and then think detection. And because you're an SME and you've got limited resources, these proportions here are pretty good, but for an SME, I might even reduce detection. I might say, look, you've got this limited budget, it's going to take this to do protection to a reasonable standard. If I have to compromise detection, then do that every day of the week. Focus on protection first. If that compromises detection, that's good for an SME. As an organization gets bigger, they can do both, and there's no excuse, they can do both well. But if you're very limited on budgets, so for example, we did a workshop, what we call a design workshop, which is an event just for one company, designing a detection solution. And as part of that process, we talked to them a little bit about things they can do to improve their wider cybersecurity. It will happen to come up during the day, but we've got the managing director in the room during the whole of that day. And I said, and she asked, okay, this detection system we're designing, very good, fits the brief, like it, want it. This cost it's going to do, could we do sort of half of it this year and add the other half next year? And I said, yes, that is really quite reasonable, because with limited budgets, if doing it all straight away would compromise your level of protection, then you've got the right strategy. You want the detection, you need the detection, but you don't want to spend too much on it. Applies for SMEs. They're an SME, but they're at the upper end of an SME, 100 plus people. That's at their level, having that discussion. Why insurance is a waste. The first thing is I've done more in-depth sessions on some of the limitations of cybersecurity insurance and some of the exclusions, and it's getting more difficult to get, and it's getting a lot more expensive. So a lot of people are saying, look, we just don't want to spend all that money on that. We'd rather put it into preventing the breaches. But for an SME, it can be a waste because it's not going to pay for reputational damage. The exclusions can be dangerous and people don't read them and understand them. The incident response is weak. We covered in the last session some of the seriously bad stuff that incident responders have done on behalf of insurance companies. But the biggest downside for an SME is that the insurance might lead you to think, I don't need to do something in that area because I'm insured. It's a dangerous path, but you sometimes get that people think, I've insured against it, the job is done. But when you think about it, you might have buildings insurance in your business, but you're not going to do things dangerous that would potentially burn your business down. You might have insurance for your possessions at home, but you're not going to leave your front door open and your windows open when you go on holiday, because you don't care whether you get burgled because you've got insurance. So yeah, insurance plays a part for some people in certain circumstances, but you still want to prevent the bad things happening. Standards and certifications. So what will help you? Cyber Essentials Plus, definitely. I know it's a UK only standard and people attend these from other countries, but it's a really good standard. It doesn't mess about with doing risk assessments and looking at different areas of it. It just says, do these things. It doesn't cover everything. And I was a bit snotty about it when it first came out. I was a payment card industry data security standard snob. And when Cyber Essentials came out, I said, oh, well, it's poor because it only covers this and it's really limited. But I've complete convert to it, because for smaller organizations who could never get anywhere near the PCI DSS, the Cyber Essentials have done a great job of saying, what are the most important things and how do I prevent most breaches? Is that a question? It is. It's a question. Right. Do you have, I need to pull it a bit closer, it's a bit small. Do you have any suggestions around building a good cybersecurity culture within the workplace, given that we find ourselves WFH?
Working from home. Working
from home. Okay. Type it out. If somebody gives you some terminology, that's right. We have a good cybersecurity culture within the workplace, but we are not in the workplace. We're working from home permanently. Okay, good question, and it does apply to SMEs. Thank you. Most important, number one thing, working from home, don't let people use their own personal devices. I'm coming on to it, but that is the number one thing. If they're using personally owned devices, there's all sorts of things on personally owned devices that lead them to getting hacked, and that will lead to cybersecurity breaches. So the more you mix personal devices and home devices, personal devices and work devices, and the more you mix work activities and home activities and mix what it happens in on each machine, the more breaches you'll get. So you want personal stuff happening on personal devices, work stuff happening on work devices. Get them completely separate, you will have less breaches. I'm not sure whether that's answered the question in terms of culture, but it's so important. Do that first before you start thinking about fixing the culture. Sorry? Training. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of training. Because most of it is a waste of time. Most of it is training people in all aspects of cybersecurity that's completely irrelevant to preventing them causing breaches. So focus on phishing, train them how to spot phishing, test them and educate them and retest them. Do phishing really well, because other than only use your work computer for work stuff, and the password you use on there, don't use it for your personal things. That's all the training you need. Use your work computer for work, keep your passwords secure, and don't use it anywhere else. And then let's teach you loads of stuff about phishing. And for most people working in most organizations, your general users, that's all that you need. There are some other things about working from home, you know, who else is in the room, who can see what you're doing. There's some other things, but they're nowhere near as important as those things. So split personal and business devices, get them good at phishing. Good question. Standards and certification. So like Cyber Essentials, because it tells you what to do, it's quite a rigid standard. That's what's good about it. Gets you to do solid, good things, prevents lots of breaches. If you want a similar approach, but to a higher level, and this is if you are handling card data, because SMEs handle card data, the payment card industry data security standard, similar approach. It does include a risk assessment. It's a waste of time, because having done the risk assessment, it doesn't change what you have to do. You have to do what you're told, but you have to do a risk assessment for some bizarre reason. I did raise this with the Standards Council years ago, and they said, you're right in that it doesn't serve a useful purpose, but we think that you'll do the risk assessment before you've done the standard, and it will help you persuade you that the standard is a good idea. So there's a tenuous reason for doing it. But anyway, both standards tell you what to do, don't leave you open to doing the wrong things. One takes you to a really high level appropriate for card data. One takes you to a sensible level appropriate for SMEs. What will waste your time for most SMEs is 27001 and lots of others, because they're very paper-based, very process-based, take up lots of your time and energy, and I'm to be persuaded that they're a good idea for small organizations. I can be persuaded. So for example, if you're a small organization and you say, we sell to government departments and we have to go through tenders, and every single tender asks us for 27001, and then when we win tenders, people want to audit us and they come in to look at our paperwork and processes, and all the questions they ask us are based on 27001, then do 27001. It's obvious, do it. It's going to help you win more business and it's going to help you deal with all those tenders. But don't be under the illusion that that is the most efficient way to prevent cybersecurity breaches, because it isn't. Because you can go through the whole process and build the world's best 27001, and you can have vulnerabilities facing the internet, your users clicking on phishing, you can have things unpatched, and you can be getting hacked and not detecting it. And all of that can be happening even though you've got a fantastic 27001 system, piles of paperwork, and everybody telling you how wonderful you are. So you should find there are real cybersecurity improvements come out of doing something like 27001 and doing risk assessments, but it's a pretty inefficient way of hitting the really bad stuff really quickly. So do it if you really need it, but focus on the stuff that's going to prevent breaches. Outsourced IT. What do? I'm a small business. I haven't got anybody in IT. Everything's outsourced. I've got a local supplier. I probably got them because they were cheap. Or maybe I know the owner, or maybe they're good. Maybe I get a good service from them for whatever reason. How do I make sure that they're doing cyber security? Dead simple. You say to them, right, Cyber Essentials, and I should have said on the last slide, there is Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. Everything I said about how good Cyber Essentials is the plus, because the plus involves bringing somebody like us in to confirm you've done it correctly. Cyber Essentials Basic involves somebody filling in a questionnaire and saying yes to everything. That's all it needs. It needs somebody who has the ability to say yes. So it's not worth the paper it's written on. Plus means you've done it properly and you've got the certificate from somebody who's come in and checked what you've done. Right, so having got over that, your IT provider, you go to them and you say, right, Cyber Essentials is what the government has said is appropriate and reasonable and proportionate for SMEs. I think it's a good idea, and I expect you, as my IT provider, to provide my IT in line with Cyber Essentials. Pretty reasonable request. And they might go, yes, we agree. They might, well, there's three things they might say. They might go, yes, we agree, and we already do it, but we didn't even bother telling you. Or they may go, yes, we agree, and yeah, well, that's reasonable. We will work to achieve that. Or they might go, well, that's a bit unfair because you hammered us so much on price that we have to do some extra stuff, so it's going to cost you a little bit more. That's actually pretty reasonable, and they may be right. So maybe you're getting it already, maybe there's a bit of a cost. But anyway, you get Cyber Essentials built into your contract with them. So you say, contractually, I want you to do my IT in line with Cyber Essentials. And then once a year, you bring in somebody like us, and for a small company, it might be one day, bring in somebody to say, can you give me a certificate? Can you assess what this company is doing? Give me a certificate. And you've got two outcomes. You're going to either get your certificate, happy days, everything's good, or you're not, in which case you've got some actions and you go to the provider and say, you know, you said you would do this in line with Cyber Essentials. Well, you're not, because here's things that aren't right, fix them. And so you've got a really efficient way of getting your security up to the level of Cyber Essentials, and you haven't learned anything at this point about cybersecurity. So you may be a business owner and you don't need to learn about cybersecurity. You don't need to do training courses. You simply need to know, I'm going to get my systems to this government recommended standard written by the people who understand what they're doing in the National Cybersecurity Centre. Once a year, my assessor comes in, tells me whether I'm in good shape or not. If I'm not, if they're any good, they can help explain it to me in plain English, but I don't really care because I'm just going to go straight to my IT provider and say, fix it, and then bring my assessor in again to sort it and to confirm that it's been fixed. So simple way to deal with outsourced IT. Remember, you might have to pay for some extra services, and they may turn around and go, well, actually, now we understand you want cyber essentials. Realistically, you only buy these things from us, and these bits are outside our control. But that's all good stuff, because you're learning of what you're getting, what you're not getting, and you're identifying gaps in your security. Right, so let's now have a look at how do we go a bit further. So the ECSC SME roadmap. So we're going to more depth on this and relate it to individual clients when we do the workshops. But what we've got here is thinking about cybersecurity at two levels. The bottom level is you're so small an organization that you don't really have any IT function. So it may be that the owner, the founder sort of works it out, or somebody just tries their best with IT, but you don't have real expertise. You've got no cybersecurity expertise anywhere here, but below the line, you've got what can I reasonably do without really much IT expertise. So the first one is separate business and personal. Turn on antivirus and make sure it's auto updating. Get somebody to run some external vulnerability scans. What they're doing is looking like the hacker. So it's not full, you may have heard of penetration testing, which is much more in-depth and more expensive. It's not that. It's running a simple scan, but it's a sort of scan that hackers are running every day. So it's saying, what do we look like to a hacker? How attractive do we look like to a hacker? And if something, alarm bells are rung from that, then you can address it. And then train your users on phishing, test them and train them on phishing. So they're all things that can be done reasonably without much IT expertise. Then you get to the point where you've got some IT expertise, either external or you've got an internal person, but nobody's claiming or realistically really good at cybersecurity. What should you do then? Right, that's when your Cyber Essentials Plus comes in, because you've got enough technical expertise to achieve that. Get a retainer with somebody like us in case it goes wrong, so you've got experts when you need them. Think about detection, and there are things you can do as a small company to build detection capability that doesn't cost a huge amount of money. That it's a slippery slope to spending lots of money, and there's lots of very elaborate things you can do, which are great, but realistically for an SME, it may be something very limited that you do, but it's possible. Then look at the ICO security outcomes. So again, UK focused here. The Information Commissioner's Office has published, these are the minimum things that you should be doing, all organizations, to meet GDPR. So you've got some responsibilities around the personal information that you hold, and that document says this is what is reasonable. But I would do it in order of left to right, bottom corner to top corner. So I would be doing those GDPR ICO security outcomes last when I've done all the other things. It's not a question. There was a sort of leaning forward as if there was a question, but it wasn't. What the ICO expects from an SME is Cyber Essentials. They recommend it. It's written for SMEs. Remember the plus, get it certified properly. The security outcomes does say that you have to have some element of detection in place around access to that personal information. And obviously they publish the outcomes. So those are the three that the Information Commissioner's Office will be looking at. So if you get into the unfortunate position where you have a breach, because you can't do perfect security, there's limitations as SME, you've got that retainer in place. So therefore you can show we've done a really good response and done things properly because we've got professional advice when we need it. And then your defense to the ICO will be, well, we did what you asked. We got Cyber Essentials. We got it to a plus level. Here's our certificate. And we'd also worked towards building things around the security outcomes document. So you're building a really good defense there. So if the worst does happen, you're very unlikely to get a fine. And we've got lots of clients that we've helped following a breach, and we get them to a position where the ICO says no action taken, no fine. Those are never published. So the ICO does not publish a list of all the people that have had breaches where they've taken no further action. You don't hear about those, which is why you might think it only happens to big companies, because all those SMEs that are having breaches but are doing the right thing are not getting fined. So they reserve the fines for, tends to be the large organizations or the people doing really bad stuff or really incompetent stuff. The one most important slide of the day for SMEs and everybody else, multi-factor authentication. So what this is for an SME. You're a business owner, you've attended this because you want to learn about cybersecurity, but you're not an expert. When you log into anything across the internet, and the important thing here is like a business login. So you may have moved some of your IT under the guidance of your IT provider into the cloud. Fantastic, and can work from anywhere. Hopefully not on the personal computer, but you can work from anywhere. I can log into things across the internet. That login is really dangerously exposed because people will be tricking you into stealing your username and password through phishing emails, or if you've used the same username and password somewhere else and that site's got hacked, somebody's got hold of that username and password, they'll be trying it across lots of different logins. So the thing that protects you is multi-factor authentication. In the old days, it was called two-factor authentication, and we upgraded it by calling it multi-factor authentication, and still did exactly the same stuff. So multi-factor authentication, MFA, in lots of situations, can just be switched on. And what it will do is do something with your mobile phone, send you a text message. You think, oh, I've seen these when I do, increasingly when you say shop online, it will send you a code to your mobile phone. You'll have to register your mobile phone along with your credit card. You buy something unusual or different or expensive and increasingly anything, and it will send a text message to your mobile phone that you then type in that shows it must be you. That's what this is. It's saying, if somebody steals your username and password, tries to log in as you, because your mobile phone is being used as part of the process, they will not have hacked your username and password and stolen your mobile phone. That's really unlikely. So therefore you're protected. It won't work when they try and do it. There is an exception to something I've said today. I said how important it is to separate your business and personal. So I said personal stuff on your personal devices, business stuff on your business devices. Really important. Keep it separate. Do it now. Well, actually, do it after you switch to MFA on, because it's not quite as important as that. But do it very quickly. But there's an exception, and that is this multi-factor authentication system. I said uses your mobile phone. So something comes to your mobile phone. I don't care what that mobile phone is, whether it's personal or business, does not matter. You're not logging in with the mobile phone. You're not viewing data with the mobile phone. You're not processing data. You're not accessing systems. Doesn't matter. The mobile phone. Now, if we've got somebody attending who's a cybersecurity expert, they may, and not really relevant for them, thinking about the SMEs and the limitations, they may be going, well, there's potentially ways you can hack. Maybe they've had an advanced preview of our new podcast, How to Hack People with MFA Switched On. Or maybe there's some really obscure thing around compromising mobile phones. Yeah, I accept all of that. But for most people, switching on multi-factor authentication and using any mobile phone is so much better than having it switched off. Mobile accessing across the internet, MFA switched off, your security is here, you switch it on, it's here. And what the experts are arguing about, the pros and cons of slightly different ways of doing it, it's arguing about that last 1%. You've just made your security way better than it was before. Do MFA, switch it on today. Don't listen to the next two sessions. They're not as important as switching on MFA. Do it today. Don't discuss the merits of different solutions. Just switch it on. And if the owner, chief executive, finance director, etc., senior people want to be exempt from this, I'd probably go and work somewhere else, because you're going to get a lot of experience in breaches, because they are the biggest target. So exceptions for executives when it comes to MFA is really, really bad. They do have their mobile phones with them, and it's not unreasonable to have their mobile phone when they log in. I sometimes get law firms where senior partners think they're above the rules. What I do in those cases is give them a nice, dramatic, big lettered high risk form, and state that this security measure that they're wanting to be exempt from is really key to preventing breaches. If they want to be exempt from it, that's fine. They're a senior managing partner, etc., of a law firm. I use them as a bad example, but if they want to be exempt from it, that is fine. But they are agreeing that if that one failure, their exemption from it, leads to them causing a breach, then the cost of that breach will be deducted from their annual bonus. just sign here and we're happy to cooperate. And invariably they will go, well, maybe having my mobile phone with me when I'm logging on isn't such a bad thing anyway. Backups. Backups are important. We covered this a bit in the last session on incident response. The important thing for SMEs, now SMEs are sometimes bad at backups and struggle with it, but there is an important element of ransomware that involves the attackers corrupting, destroying, encrypting, just deleting, just doing something bad to backups, so that when they deploy ransomware, you can't recover any IT systems and then you have to pay the ransom. So it's an important element to think about as an SME and get some advice about how your backups are protected and how could we isolate them, switch them off, and retain data that can't be accessed by the hackers. So it's an important area. It's not as simple as saying separate business and personal, switch on MFA. It's a bit more complicated, but it's an important topic, which is why I've got it in big letters there. Well, it's big for me because I've got a big screen just under the camera. Yours might be smaller, but it's still important. Who to trust? Not the latest technology, and not the commission salesperson selling it. So just be wary of what people are trying to sell you. Where you're going to get independent advice from. You want independent advice as an SME. So remember that Cyber Essentials, written by the government with the best intentions, the good people in the National Cybersecurity Centre to help SMEs. So do what it says in there. That's good advice. And it's not about somebody trying to sell you stuff on commission. I believe so much that damage is done from commission salespeople that last year we got rid of all commissions across the organisation. So no salesperson and nobody involved anywhere in the sales process, or consultants who might be advising. Nobody's getting bonuses or commissions for anything in our company, because we think it just works so against giving good advice to people. So where can you get help from? Qualified security assessors can be good. So the assessor that comes for Cyber Essentials, they're normally a pretty good source of advice. They're normally not a salesperson. Even though the organisation they're working from might be wanting to sell you stuff, they're normally good, ethical people who will give you good advice. Vendor independent experts, people like testers. I've said the National Cybersecurity Centre. So qualified security experts, often they have a culture of giving good, sound advice and not trying to sell you something. So you'll get quite a different advice from the commission salesperson and the cybersecurity expert whose primary goal in life is to make the world better and to improve cybersecurity. And although I really love salespeople because they pay our salaries, their goal in life isn't necessarily to make the world more secure. It should be, but maybe it isn't. Okay, National Cybersecurity Centre, I said they're really good. Okay, it's UK based, but the advice is good, and it's not just because I used to be a consultant with GCHQ. They give good guides to SMEs, and I generally agree with 99% of what they say. Not everything. Like to have some differences of opinion. So, for example, here, this is a nicely designed bit of stuff on ransomware. What do they say in there? I said backups. You need to think about backups. What they've said here is yes. They said make sure the device containing your backup data, and they've recognized that for a small organization, it might be an external hard drive or a USB stick, is not permanently connected to your computer. It's just what I've said. It's saying you need to somehow isolate the way you're doing backups. So if ransomware hits, the people deploying the ransomware can't disrupt, delete, encrypt, generally break that backup. Whatever you do, if you're in the middle of a breach, before you get the experts in, don't then take that backup and plug it in and try and recover your systems when you don't know what you're doing, because the hackers will still be there and they'll then wipe the backup. So just be really careful. You're trying to isolate it, but that means you're going to be really careful where you use it. So if you've got some experts in, then they will be helping you create a new clean environment and rebuilding things and doing it in a safe way so you don't ruin those backups. But anyway, good bit of advice. It's an example here of something I disagree with, because I thought it would be good to show you something I disagreed with. And this is in ransomware, they talk a little bit here about, should I pay the ransom? Now, for a few years, lawyers said you shouldn't pay a ransom because you might be breaking the law, because you might be funding terrorism. But I've been in the room with clients discussing the need to pay ransoms with police officers present, and nobody's ever said you're breaking the law. The only comment I've ever heard related to this from the police is, if you're going to pay, could you pay using a Bitcoin route that we recommend, because this route allows you to trace things, or allows the police to trace things. So it's a major incident, the police are involved, then that's a request they can make. But as it says here, law enforcement don't condone on paying ransoms, but and they don't encourage it, but they don't say that you're breaking the law. I've said something in the last few days which could be relevant, probably not for SMEs, but there is a certain theory now that if you believe and you've got good evidence that you have had ransomware from a Russian-based gang, you could be breaking sanctions and therefore breaking the law if you pay a ransom. Bit obscure, probably not much of a need to think about that as an SME. However, the thing I disagree with here, it says if you pay a ransom, you're more likely to be targeted in the future. I just don't think so. I just don't think there's evidence to say that. There's certainly evidence that if your house gets burgled and you've got some expensive stuff and you claim on your insurance and you don't do anything to improve the security of the house, the same burglars might come back in 3 months to steal all the new stuff that the insurance companies provided you with. That's sort of common knowledge. But in cybersecurity terms, people make stupid mistakes. Their security is bad. They get a breach and it's a real call to action, and they improve things massively and they don't get subsequent breaches. So now you might say, oh, your experience is skewed because if they brought us in, then they are taking security seriously and they will follow our advice and they will improve things. Well, anyway, yes. So do the right things, learn from it, improve it. You are now not becoming a target because you've paid the ransom. So I just don't think paying it once makes you a repeated target. The hackers look for the easiest targets. You've had a breach, use experts like ourselves, you won't be an easy target in the future. So I just disagree with that. But if that's the only thing I disagree with all this stuff that they're putting out, then it's good advice. So let's think about where you might be in the process. Today's a free webinar, allows us to scratch the surface a bit, give a few good tips and things to do today and things that are important for SMEs, gives you a strategy for using outsourced IT providers, etc., etc. Big plus for Cyber Essentials. Can you do things with detection? Yeah, you can do that, and you can do it at a reasonable cost. How do we work out what that is related to you and in depth? That's the next stage, which is going into a workshop. And there's then further we can do, but you don't need to worry about that for now. So workshops, you can book these today. We've got them in May, and we've got one specifically on SMEs. I'm not sure of the order, you'll have to check. It'll be the 23rd, the 24th, or the 25th of May. And we're now running these virtually because so many people have asked us to do this. So you can attend virtually. We've built a way next door that we can have people in the room. So if you're close to Yorkshire, you want to come along in the room, you can do, but you can attend virtually. And we've got big screens so we can see the individuals involved, and we can share slides and flip charts as well. We can electronically share flip charts. So a whole morning focused on SME. What makes this distinctive is that when you sign up, we allocate a consultant to do some scoping to understand your situation, your challenges, and what your IT systems look like. We don't present that on the day, but we make sure the content is tailored so that it's useful for everybody. So if you've got some particular challenges, those will be addressed on the day. I mean, you can ask about them on the day and you can share what you want about your individual situation, but because we've learnt about it beforehand, we sit down and plan the event and tailor the content for all the different challenges of the people there. And to make that work, we limit the numbers. So although they're virtual, we run the numbers similar to if they were in the room together, so that we can make sure everybody gets the appropriate amount of attention. So if you're near us in Yorkshire, then happy for 1 or 2 clients to attend in person, but you can attend virtually. And then we've got things on breach detection and website protection as well on those 3 days, which leads me on to the next sessions. 11 o'clock, 10 minutes time-ish, going to look at breach detection, and then 12 o'clock, securing websites. Breach detection is more about doing the right things, and you can do those things with lots of different technologies. Securing websites is more about, you need to do those right things, but also there's some horrible technologies that do it really badly. So you need to avoid those horrible technologies. So there's a lot of people think they're protecting their websites and they're not. So there's a bit of a different emphasis between the next session and the last one this morning. Okay, any final questions? Okay, thank you very much for attending.